There are 6 million abandoned homes in this country today. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You are listening to the #1 podcast called Housing Insiders, designed for regulators, builders, lenders, and everyone that believes that everyone should be well housed. I am Jonathan Lawless.
And I'm Jeremy Potter. On Housing Insiders, we're hosting the conversations you won't hear anywhere else about how to make housing more innovative and attainable.
And we're really happy to be partnering with Built Rewards, who's sponsoring this episode and all of these great, smart conversations that we're able to have. If you have an idea for a show or want to sponsor an episode, you can always reach us at podcasts@thehousinginsiders.com.
And if you like what you're hearing, we want to bring you more of these episodes. We hope that you'll keep listening and we'll keep making them. So please subscribe, add a review, share our episodes so that we can bring more to you. Thank you.
All right. It's the last episode of the year. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, so on and so forth, whatever you celebrate. Jeremy, hopefully you have something good coming up soon.
Happy holidays to you, John, and Merry Christmas. Yeah, we're staying in Detroit, so we have a very cozy Christmas is how I would describe it, or how my daughter would like to describe it.
That's fantastic. I will be coming in your direction only halfway and stopping at Pittsburgh to visit my in-laws and other family out there, but looking forward to what might be a white Christmas. We'll see. But in any case, I'm excited about today's episode. I think we have an amazing guest.
Sounds great, John. We will be putting you on the hot seat. That's right. John is our guest, so no worries on the intro there. As anybody who's listened before knows John very well, but you don't need to do your own intro. You don't need to do your own bio. We know you from the past episodes, but now we're going to flip the script on you, and you're going to be answering the questions.
I'm excited to do this. I've been working on this for this thing that we're going to talk about for a long time. It's really important that everybody in the industry understand what it is, how it works. And I think really, ultimately, if they support it, to help advocate for it in the long term. So I'm really excited to talk about today's topic and really get into it.
That's right. Let's jump right in. I mean, one of the things that caused us to look at this topic and to really dig in, and I think as we go through the topic, everyone will hear how passionate you are on digging into the details here and seeing this through to reality. But one of the key reasons is the convergence of all these different economic, political, and cultural moments around housing. We've had a big year, honestly, in housing, and there's a huge question looming, which is, how do we make housing more affordable and attainable? We have been talking about that for a very long time, John, but the greater media, political landscape, and now even corporate America, larger than just the housing industry, is asking that question. And we both grew up on the housing finance side, the lending side in particular, Fannie Mae for you, independent lenders, and Rocket Mortgage at the end there for me, as well as some of the other kind of startup things that we've worked on. And one of the things that we found was it's very difficult to influence the supply side when you're coming from the housing finance side. And so as this conversation about affordability popped up, the question became, how do we come together and talk more directly about supply across the housing spectrum? What are we doing? And how do we use housing finance as a lever? And so we hope today to answer that very specific question. How do we use housing finance as a lever for the supply side, not the demand side, with the GSEs? So that's our very specific goal.
Was that just off the top of your head, dude? That was really exceptionally good.
Excellent.
I love
I'm
it.
glad to hear that.
Great setup.
That's why we had you on as our guest. There we go. So I've earned my hosting hat here, John. But let's start there. So that's the backdrop. That's the context. Let's start at the very highest level. What are Fannie and Freddie doing today that counts as supply side interventions, if any?
Yeah, it's a great question. And before that, the only thing I would add to your introduction is that, to your point, the industry, but honestly, everybody in Washington is sort of fumbling around trying to find solutions. And they're asking people for solutions. And I think the answers that they're getting are muddied. They're semi-thought through, they're misunderstood. And so my hope and intention is to have actually really thought through everything from top to bottom on a solution, and then work with a coalition of people from builders, regulators, really everybody, to sort of put this in front of people in Washington to get them convinced of this. So to answer your question, and I think this is often what you'll hear, is like Fannie and Freddie have very limited ability to affect supply. On the single family side, I'd say that the two closest things that they do are, number one is they do mortgage loans that finance new homes, right? So if you go and buy a new home from Pulte, you can get a loan through Pulte's mortgage company or somebody else, and that's what Fannie Mae's doing. That's just a normal loan. That's not really doing anything to stimulate supply. It's helping people buy supply. Now, that's important to be able to do, but it's not really building the homes or directed to building the homes. And then, of course, they have renovation programs, which, if you're buying a home and need to do a small to moderate fix to the home, they do have renovation programs that are pretty good, so that might count as a supply effort. But honestly, both of those things are very far from stimulating the supply side. They've been around for a long time. They're unchanged. And as this crisis is unfurled, they really haven't evolved to meet the needs that the market is signaling today.
Okay, so we've got a gap in what Fannie and Freddie can or are focused on, specifically around single family home construction. So then tell us a little bit about what the categories of single family home construction we should be thinking about that are happening, and then we'll try to put two and two together.
Yeah, great. It's a great place to start. I'm glad you asked that question, because these two forms of single family financing for construction often get confused with one another. The first is what I just sort of refer to as general AD&C financing. That means that's a large production builder who's going to go acquire a large piece of land, develop that piece of land, and then construct homes on it. And the way that typically works is they've got a meaningful amount of equity. They often are holders of land. These are the companies like Pulte, Lennar, and others, and they're building the homes and selling them, and that's how they get their money back. But they're building many, many homes at a time, and they are large production builders, and they're very good at what they do. That market clearly has a lot of issues, and this is not what we're going to talk about, but I want to separate that market out, because a lot of people get scared about construction financing because of the risk. And where that risk really exists is in that market, where you're putting $100 million into one spot, where you're really hoping that no economic downturn happens between the time you start and you build the 100th home. And that's a very risky proposition. I totally understand the need to think about construction risk there. I'm talking about a separate market, which is what often gets referred to as the construction to permanent market. And what that refers to is, if I, as a buyer, say, I want to build my own home, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go try to find a piece of land. I'm going to go try to finance the construction. I need to ultimately, once the construction's done, get a final loan. And the reason that market gets termed construction to permanent is because the way that market works today is there's two phases of the lending. There's the phase that happens while it's being built, and then typically it has to convert to the quote unquote permanent phase, in which it basically becomes a loan that anybody would do today. And that's the market that today, I should have probably mentioned this earlier, the GSEs do buy those loans after the construction is complete. So what that means is an initial loan, sometimes a single bridge loan gets made. That loan at some point is then refinanced into a normal loan, and Fannie Mae will buy that. Or the other way that gets done is one loan gets made during the construction period. It's one kind of loan, then it gets modified, and then it becomes a normal loan, and then Fannie Mae will buy that one as well. So that's the construction to perm market, and you should think of that really more of like the infill kind of solution, rather than the financing for large plots of land where you're going to have dozens and dozens of homes being built.
Right. So that makes a ton of sense. Big subdivision gets purchased and built. All of those loans are really end loans for the homeowners that buy those out of the financing that the developer forwarded. Construction to perm, also available to consumers, but let's be honest, really pretty fragmented or janky. It is, I need this money over here, and then I hold that money for 6 to 8 months, maybe more. Then I put that money into the end financing, what we're calling the permanent financing, and I get my traditional Fannie Mae mortgage, Freddie Mac mortgage, or whatever at the end of that process. But to the lender and to Freddie and Fannie, it doesn't look any different than many other loans that are delivered. It's a 30-year fixed loan on a house that's now occupied. And so that's not really changing much when it comes to efficiency or liquidity for new home stock.
That's right. It's not there at the beginning. It's only there when the construction is done. So it's not really financing the construction. It's financing a completed new home, which is just like financing a new home that Pulte built in a subdivision. It's no different.
So every now and then you will hear a lender, or particularly a bank or a credit union, advertise single close construction. And sometimes loan officers or branch managers ask, can we have a single closed construction loan. Stepping back from the GSEs for just a second, what's that look like, and why aren't Fannie and Freddie thinking that way? Or just maybe at first, is that an available option, or how should we think about single closed construction in the conversation?
Yeah, the reason that single close is often desired by different lenders is because, as I mentioned, there's kind of two ways to handle the construction phase. The one way you use a bridge loan, which is a loan that ultimately goes away when the construction is done. It gets refinanced into a completely new loan. And the problem with that process is you have now two closings. You have the closing on the bridge loan and then the closing on the permanent loan. Now, construction could take 12 months. So you, as a lender, are now making a loan that you are hoping to God 12 months from now, rates or the borrower's credit hasn't gotten so bad or changed that the borrower can still take out that loan in a permanent loan. There's a ton of uncertainty there, both from the consumer's credit standing and from the interest rate environment. What a single closed loan does is it tries to address some of that. And the way it does that is instead of having a two loan process, you just make one loan that instead gets modified. And so the benefits there is as long as the construction gets done in a reasonable period of time, you've kind of locked in one closing. Now, it still oftentimes doesn't take care of the interest rate risk because it's on your balance sheet until it's done and then you sell it. So you're not sure where that's going to end up. It saves it from the borrower's perspective, but it doesn't save it from the balance sheet perspective. And it also doesn't completely solve for what could happen to the borrower because if the construction takes too long or some age of dock kicks in and it expires, then you also have the uncertainty of closing. But you still only have one loan, which saves you some closing costs and some closing fees. And if done quickly, it could also save you a double underwrite and the risk of the consumer not requalifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great point, which is we want to make it easier for everybody to understand and to do. In a single closed environment, it takes care and starts to address some of that. But I think what we know is, as a consumer, I'm going to want what I want when I want it. That's just how consumers are, right? And so
Mm.
if the deal's changing, I'm going to feel as though I have the ability to change the deal too. And if something happens in my life, well, I can't possibly be responsible for this. So a lot of those kind of softer, what I'll call like softer or contextual issues, become risks that have really, for lack of a better way to put this, thrown roadblocks or obstacles into this conversation in the past.
Oh, yeah, and I'll hit on one theme that we'll keep coming back to, right? When you put yourself in the shoes of a consumer and you think about having to go through a product called construction to permanent, where it gets modified at some point. You may even have to deal with a land loan if you're acquiring the land separately. It is like the worst fucking marketing that you could ever have for a product or process. And if it isn't scary enough to get a mortgage, you had those kind of terms and you're just going to scare about just about everybody
Yeah.
unless those are like have some masochistic fortitude to actually push themselves through the process. It's just not great marketing. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of times, what we hear from consumers, they feel lost in the middle where there's long periods of just no communication whatsoever on what's going on in the financing part, in the construction part. And where there are different people, I think, working on some of the efficiencies, what we joke in about the Domino's pizza tracker of different aspects of this, but there really has been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of confusion around, making this easier, making it more accessible.
When we talk about product and innovation, I mean, we always talk about the product itself. Does the product itself make sense? And is it structured in a way that's consumer friendly and thoughtful about the audience it serves? But then we also think about distribution and marketing, which in a lot of cases is more important than the product itself. And in this case, both are terribly broken. You have a terrible product that has even worse marketing. And you look around and say, well, no wonder we're only doing $20 billion, I think at most, of this product per year in this country.
Yep. And this is a $1 trillion problem, as we've seen, right? The housing market is now clearing 44 trillion, and we need more houses, and supply will, as we know, drive down the cost. So we've got a context here. We've got a situation here where it works to say, let's figure out a way to build more houses more efficiently with more clarity for more people. Fannie and Freddie were set up to be mechanisms of liquidity, mechanisms of efficiency, balancing out a market that is otherwise unbalanced in cycles at times. So this does seem like a natural fit at like that big philosophical level. What is the reason this problem hasn't been solved yet? Is it everything we just said? Why aren't the GSEs already in this business to begin with?
They've been in and out of versions of this business and solved small aspects of this. I think they have been unwilling to really go the extra step to solve for it because honestly, in most environments up until call it 2012, housing supply wasn't the problem. It was, getting access to financing. And they've focused on those problems almost exclusively. And they've done an amazing job. They have an amazing process. They have highly reliable liquidity. They've done that really well. I think since 2012, they just haven't been in a position where they've been allowed to innovate and really look at these problems in a new way and push and do something totally different, but that will radically redefine this market. What I'm excited about, and I think you phrased it really well, we have all these sort of political, social, economic trends that are converging in this one perfect moment where the GSEs are perfectly positioned. And I say the GSEs, honestly, there's questions about whether or not Freddie Mac can do this because of their charter. It's a question that Freddie Mac will have to solve. So I often talk about this as a Fannie Mae thing, but this
Mhm.
is the moment. Fannie Mae can step up, and I think they can really transform this industry.
All right, well then, drum roll. Now is the moment for your elevator pitch. We're going to dig into it, obviously, in detail, but give us the explanation and summary of what it is Fannie Mae could do, should do, and then we'll start breaking down the component pieces.
Yeah, the basic idea here is that Fannie Mae makes two major changes to the way construction to permanent gets done today. Number one is they buy and securitize the loan as soon as it is originated on day one. This is prior to the construction starting. And then the second aspect is today, the lenders manage and bear all the risk for the construction period until the construction's complete, and then that risk transfers over to Fannie Mae. And them bearing the risk has created real problems. So, in a nutshell, the product that I'm talking about is a single close, single purchase to Fannie Mae, no risk to the lender construction product. And I don't even call it a construction to perm because there's no to permanent to be done. It is a single close construction loan. And if I had to put a little marketing spin on it, I'm calling it the build my home mortgage because I don't like the name construction to permanent or a single close construction loan. But for geeks like us, we can call it the Fannie Mae single close construction loan.
That's right. Well, now that we're outside of just housing geeks like us, and we need to be able to talk to the larger market and the political and media ramifications of supply side interventions, I think, build my home, build your home mortgage is exactly right. So we've got the framing, we've got the marketing. It seems over the last few years, John, that Fannie Mae has been pulling more data and more of the process up front anyway. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the parallels here that fit in with what Fannie Mae's already been doing to bring more data, more certainty up front in the lending process? And how does this kind of play into those evolutions of data or tech?
That's a very, very thoughtful question. I would say that the two issues you have to solve for is the purchase at day one and how you purchase and securitize that. And the second issue you have to solve for is how do you take the risk away from the lender and put it somewhere else? And that second thing is where I think your question is the most relevant, which is how do we get the right data on day one to figure out how to intelligently place the risk where it really belongs and do that confidently? And what the proposal says is instead of the lender being on the hook, you now say the builder's on the hook. Now, that's tricky because the builder is not an official insurance company. So you've got to have some way of managing what builders participate in the program and how do you manage and oversee that. And that's kind of where your question comes into play. First and foremost, you bring in builders and only builders that have a proven track record. You look at the data, you look at their track record, you look at their financial standing, and just like Fannie Mae would approve a new service or a new lender or whatever, they would approve a new builder for participating in the program. And then you also leverage all of these amazing technologies that are out there to oversee construction. And I will give you a couple examples. Land Gorilla is one that I love. There's another company called Home Starter, a friend of ours, Sharon, has started. Another company confusingly called Built, but spelled Built. These have amazing data and amazing abilities to track and manage construction. And so all of that data being provided up front and using that data to monitor during that construction phase really increases the efficiency and it allows you to give the lender, to use framing that Fannie Mae uses, day one certainty that they no longer have to worry about the construction risk after day one.
That's right. So if you're listening to this on the lending side, day one certainty in construction should be really appealing because you understand it really well on the origination side for things like income and credit risk. Now we're talking about it with delivering construction loans and getting day one certainty in construction. So I really think if you're on the lending side listening to this, that should resonate, make a lot of sense. I think we want to dig in a little bit more on this question you pose about who's good at what in this process. We are trying to make lenders good at the phases of construction, the servicing of things like escrow accounts or other types of accounts that need to pay out. And that's why they need tech partners and other service partners like Land Gorilla and Built and Homestarter. But at the same time, it's not really what lenders are good at. It's not really what lenders are doing. Builders, on the other hand, are good at building. Can you talk a little bit about, yes, there's going to be a lending product that shifts the risk window, but are we really asking builders to do anything that they don't already do? Is there any new responsibility other than just the shift in timing that we're talking about here? How should builders think about this?
I mean, you talk to any small to mid-sized builder that has a good reputation, and they will say, wait, you're expecting me to build the home? Like, that's what I do. Like, I've done that day in, day out. I've become very good at it. And you want to hold me accountable for it? Bring it. If you're going to make the process easier and better for me, I will 100% take that accountability. And so the way that the proposal sort of tries to manage the construction risk, and there's multiple ways the construction risk gets mitigated, but it's basically saying if a builder's on the list, they have to get on that list by proving a track record. But if they screw up, they get blacklisted. Again, any small to mid-sized reputable builder will sign up for that all day long because their reputation is their business. And so they want to make sure that they're delivering homes. So for me, like, and I think you framed it up well, it's like lenders should be good at doing financial things. They should be good at making loans. They should be good at underwriting borrowers if they're mortgage lenders. And asking them to be good at construction oversight, which, by the way, literally means that what these lenders have to do, they put the money in an escrow account. The builder sends them a note and says, I'm going to build the framing now and I need this amount of money. And then that amount of money gets dispersed. And then somebody has to go to the pickup truck in the parking lot with a crumpled up receipt for whatever was paid for or charged and validate that it actually met the sort of initial. I mean, it is an unbelievably complicated and manual process that lenders have to get good at. So why is this market not very big? Well, it's because I think about 60% of the lenders that do this product are community banks. They have the balance sheet for it, and they've spent the time and money to invest in staff to do this, which is not their specialty, but they've sort of created this little niche market. So you go to somebody like Rocket and you say, hey, are you interested in building a whole staff of people to oversee construction lending and then also taking on the recourse risk of those construction loans during that time period, which, by the way, means that you're still holding those loans on balance sheet because you're subject to the risk, and accounting rules require that you capitalize for loans that you hold the risk on. Like, Rocket's going to say, no fucking way. I mean, why would I waste all my time and energy on a product that today is marginal? And so, again, this sort of requirement to put the accountability of construction on lenders on one-off home construction is crazy in my mind. By the way, and I want to distinguish this from if I'm lending on a 100 unit, 3-phase development, I'm underwriting the development. And so I'm not underwriting a borrower, I'm underwriting the development itself. And that makes sense for lenders to have that expertise. But in this case, it's a little bit different because it's one off. And lenders having the expertise to analyze one off construction projects on an individual lender basis is just crazy to me.
Yeah, and actions speak louder than words, right? That we know how Rocket feels about it. We know how Loan Depot feels about it. We know how big lenders feel about it because they're not doing it.
They
They're
don't
just,
do it.
so, and bringing them to the table to say, here's how you can do it could be incredibly valuable, particularly to those regional and mid-sized builders you mentioned, because now you're giving them some certainty and liquidity too, that the lender's not going to be a no-show with the money at the end of the day. They're vouching for their pre-approved and their origination process as well. So I like the synergy for the lender.
Built Rewards is a payment platform for housing that rewards members in their home and neighborhood. Built is the payment platform for over 5 million units because Built provides incredible value to residents and to property owners and managers that use it. Properties using Built have seen reduced turnover, increased usage of electronic payments, and fewer missed payments. And with our latest resident loyalty program, Built is changing the way that property managers can reward good behavior. Managers can assign rewards and benefits to tenants for a variety of activities like early lease renewal. If you're interested in learning more, go to alliance.builtrewards.com.
I want to just ask you a quick clarifying question, maybe a challenging question about this administrative burden, if any, on builder monitoring, approving builders and blacklisting builders if they violate the SLAs, these service level agreements that would be the expectation. I know on one hand, we do have certain approvals that have to happen for the renovation lending you mentioned at the outset. Like if you do the renovation lending with Fannie Mae, then you do have to have an approved list of contractors. You do have to keep some minimum standard and make sure you've checked. This is a little bit deeper. Do we think A, builders will have any objection to going through the vetting? And B, who's responsible for the vetting? Is it the partners of the lenders? Is it the lenders? Is it Fannie Mae keeping a global database? Because I see that being a bureaucratic kind of issue. And I'm just curious where you think that lands in the proposal.
Yeah, I think you're raising a great point about the proposal. If there's any incremental change or incremental work that needs to get done, it is this piece. Everywhere else, it reduces drastically the amount of work. So the idea is to reduce the work across thousands of lenders to do this product, across a bunch of builders to manage escrow oversight and all that stuff. It eliminates all of that headache and work and inefficiency, and it centralizes it to something that sounds complicated, but honestly, like I said, Fannie Mae is very capable of underwriting the financial capabilities of counterparties. They do it all the time with every single vendor they work with. So, at least from the pure dollars and cents side, they have the capabilities to do that. They will have to figure out how they can track and monitor the historical building reputation of the builder. How many homes have you built? They've got to figure out where to get that data. And they have to figure out, of course, how to do some monitoring over time. My suggestion, and this would be work that needs to get done, assuming they move forward with this, is work with groups like NAHB and others to come up with a clear, sensible, transparent standard that you use to pick and choose builders. Start with 20, move to 40, get to 400, and then you're off and running. And so it is additional work, but I don't think it takes a genius to do. And the exposure to any one given builder, and this is a really important part about why this product can work and mitigate the construction risk, is because the more builders you have, you're building more homes in more places, in more situations, different types of homes. You're diversifying the pool. So your exposure to one builder who at most is going to be building 5 or 10 homes at a time is just those homes, not every home in the entire portfolio of your construction to perm thing. And so I think careful monitoring, I think your risk is so minimal. And yes, there is incremental responsibilities to do that somehow. I just don't think it takes a genius to figure that out.
Yeah, that seems like one of those things that over the last, call it 10 to 15 years, at least that I'm thinking of, the Dodd-Frank years, coming up with policies hasn't been easy, but it has been a fairly regular practice. Here's the framework for this. Here's the framework for that. We've been doing frameworks actually pretty consistently now for a while with Fannie and Freddie under FHFA. So I can see your answer there. It absolutely makes sense to me. Also, I like this idea of Fannie creating liquidity, but the local builder, the regional builder, knowing the area best and choosing how homes they're going to build, the 5, the 10, the 20, whatever it is. That's on the market. That's just on, and some regions are going to build more than others, and the first mover lenders are actually going to be in the best position to take advantage of that. So let's use that as a segue, John. Let's assume Fannie understands, we create the framework, really the data, honestly, from originator perspective, the data and technology is already there. Can you talk a little bit about scaling this? You implied, 20, 40, 400. What's the opportunity other than connecting builders and lenders? What have you discovered in the research? What should we be thinking about in terms of scaling really consumer interest? Where do I find somebody to partner with this on? Once lenders start marketing, that'll help. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the larger industry reaction, assuming this were to hit the market.
Let me split that into two parts. So what does the data say about the opportunity? Like, where are there opportunities to do this? And then secondly, how does the change of the structure of this product improve the marketability of it? So let me take the first thing. I've been using this term 17-6-100. So if you remember anything from this podcast, 17-6-100. And what do I mean by that? Okay, first number, 17. 17% of the listings on Zillow today are for land. I was floored when I heard that stat. Jen Butler, I think I've mentioned that stat on this podcast before. Jen Butler at Zillow shared it with me, and I had to go and like confirm it. And even today, I was sending a note to a builder in Utah. It's like, okay, how many listings are there in Utah, and how many vacant lots are listed on Zillow? And 22% in Utah. I mean, it's so consistent everywhere. And by the way, I know what the naysayers are saying. Oh, yeah, those are like pieces of farmland in the middle of nowhere. And like, yes, but it's 17%. It's not all farmland. It is a ton of infill lots and there's a ton of opportunity. So that's the first number, 17. Next number, 6. There are 6 million abandoned homes in this country today. 6 million. All right. That's a huge number. Again, naysayers will say nobody wants to live in them. They're crappy homes. You live in Detroit, Jeremy. I'm sure you know some of these homes. And I know you know some of these homes that are dilapidated are in perfect places that if you could put a good, high quality home, people would want to buy it. And so the thing that also naysayers will say is, oh, well, you got to tear it down and you got to do environmental things. And that's just a complete misperception of what it takes to tear down a home. It costs maybe $20,000 tops to tear down a standard single family home. That is not that much money if you sort of stack it in land, or buying the property, tearing it down, and putting a new home. So 6 million, 17% of listings, 6 million vacant homes. And then the last thing, which I think is really important, is the number 100, which is the industry has spent a lot of time. We've had Mike Kinsella on, for example, advocating in the YIMBY movement to upzone places from single family zoning. And what that means is you're going to neighborhoods and saying, we are now going to allow multi-unit properties to be built in this neighborhood. Well, the problem is there are homes there already. So if you actually want to upzone and successfully see homes turn over, you need somebody to buy the home and make it a multi-unit property. And again, this is the perfect kind of context in which this type of lending product operates in. So you add up all those opportunities. 100 different cities across this country have upzoned. Okay, 6 million vacant properties, 17% of listings on Zillow being for land. When I look at that, even if I took a very conservative estimate and said 80% of that's not going to be useful, that remaining 20%, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of potential homes being built.
Yeah, what we heard from the President of the United States, in fact, is that 2026 needs aggressive housing reform. I think something along those lines was the exact quote. So we have a housing crisis that is relatively confirmed by all the economists and data that we talk about on this show. We have some folks inside the Beltway calling it an emergency, a national emergency. And we have the President of the United States on TV doing a national address saying we need aggressive housing reform. And so I think that that lays the context for what you just said. 17% and 6 million gets us out of the crisis just doing that. Doing
Yeah.
nothing else besides those two things, we don't have a crisis anymore. That's actually literally the number that we need of homes. So it's really interesting to see those two match up in that moment.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, maybe that's a little bit too ambitious. I do think it could take a huge bite out of this. It's just we've been so focused on the big production builders, and I think for right reason. Like we build 1 million homes, most of these are being built by large production builders, and so when we're looking to build more homes, like the instinct is, well, let's go talk to the people that are building homes, but they own these big pieces of land that are far away from urban centers that they're trying to figure out, how do I get people and enough demand to afford the high cost it costs me to build these homes? And that's hard to pencil out. So our focus has been there, while this little opportunity, which I was excited about initially, but then I saw the data, I'm just like, this is really something that could be a game changer for the industry. I didn't answer the second part of what I was referring to earlier, which is how do you get people to care about it? And how does this really change consumers' appetite for it? And so, like I said, the marketing is terrible for this product. Very few lenders do it. If you're a realtor, the last thing you ever want to get involved with is a renovation or construction product. And the reason is because it's highly uncertain. The financing is confusing. It's hard to get through. The closing is uncertain. You would much rather steer a consumer to go buy an existing home. Realtors are going to dissuade people from doing it. If you're lucky enough to find a lender that does it, you're lucky, like, because most lenders don't do it. And if you talk to Rocket and ask about a construction loan, they're going to say we don't do that. And then there's just the general mindset of consumers. They're like, it's a really hard, confusing, complicated thing, and I don't even want to try to consider it. And so what I'm hoping is by changing the product and getting lenders and getting builders and getting realtors to see, actually, now that we've allocated the complexity to the right party, you as a realtor, your process is as simple as finding the place, finding the builder, coordinating that thing, which is not super hard, especially if lenders and builders start partnering, which I think they will do if this works, and then closing. And closing happens immediately, and you get your commission immediately. You're done. You're out, right? There's no uncertainty about the loan down the road or whatever, and dealing with all that confusing thing. So realtors are going to love it, and I think they'll start realizing like there's not a lot of available inventory for me to sell, but shit, there's a lot of land. And if I go out there and I start creating these partnerships with builders and others, and I have a reliable financing product, I'm going to start encouraging more and more consumers to let's go do that tear down, or let's go build a new home because I'm confident that I can get it done. So just by getting the industry to operate the way I think it should, you create a process that people are going to be willing to sell on the front end. Not to mention the president of the United States, who's pushing this really hard, he could put something on Truth Social about, hey, now's the time for American families to go build the home that they want, and here's how you do it. Call this number, whatever. Like, you get the point. Like, this combination of marketing efforts, I think, is the other half of that question. It's just there's a huge opportunity in terms of like where this can be done, but there's a huge opportunity that if this works right, to create a message and a marketing strategy that gets to consumers and convinces them that this is for you.
I want to ask you about this framing of it. So you made me think of our friend Brian Copley. He and I used to talk. He's the founder of City Builder, and when we were looking at City Builder, especially when I was at Rocket, we had kind of dreamed up a campaign that was, can't find the home of your dreams, we'll build you one, or we'll build it with you, or we'll build it for you, whatever. And that's certainly a builder message, has always been a builder message, to your point, especially ones that have affiliated financing and can just control that. But because it hadn't been mainstream, the complications you laid out at the beginning of the episode were a lot of the reasons people shied away, were scared of it, or just thought it was too complicated. Interestingly, though, what you made me think of was the fix and flip market. Some of the best fix and flippers are real estate agents. They see the property, they know, they have their network, they have their approved list of everybody, they know where to get the financing. It's typically called private lending or hard money lending because it's only 6 or 8 months. And then from there, honestly, an entire social media generation of like, you can live off of rent by flipping houses and renting them out. It actually became a career path job for a lot of people who saw what real estate agents were doing and tried to make it their full-time thing, right? We saw influencers with their programs come down to the Marriott or the Holiday Inn. We'll teach you how to flip houses and live off that business. So what you're saying, I think, is twofold. One, a family who couldn't find a home or felt that it was never going to happen for them overcomes the fear of complexity and how hard this would be, because this is actually a path that now is being marketed by the trusted people in their area, mortgage lenders and real estate agents, as
Mm-hmm.
attainable, and or it becomes its kind of own story, it sounds like, where it becomes its own channel, really. And either way, I think it's probably good news for the proposal, but I still think that what you're saying is we've got to overcome the complexity together. We need real estate agents. We need National Association of Home Builders and Home Builders, because this does have the potential to get confusing fast if we don't have consensus. Is that a right way to frame it? Or how are you feeling about that marketing given the history of how complex this is?
I think you're right. What I would say, by making the changes proposed, I don't know, you change the rules of the game, for lack of a better term. And I think, as you and I know, being in the prop tech space and looking at startups, like, when the rules of the game change, that is the time when you go and look to try to figure out how to do something interesting. Suddenly I've got a mobile device that has GPS. I can create Uber, right? Like, you change the rules of the game and it creates this ability to innovate that didn't exist before. And part of how I think about this is, even without thinking about the innovation, I think there's great opportunity. But if you change the rules of the game in this space and the ways that realtors, lenders, builders can all work together to take all of these opportunities and present them to consumers, I think it creates this sudden influx of massive innovation. Imagine going on Zillow and, instead of seeing 17% be land, seeing all of those listings showing 6 or 7 different potential virtual homes that you could put on that land because a builder has agreed to do it at that price, right? And they know they can close it at that price, and they know they can get it done. That gets done very few times these days. You'll see it occasionally when you're looking at land listings, but to do that at scale in a way that you can really trust and rely, that's something we've never seen before. And when those things start to happen, when people start saying, "Oh, I could use AI to do this, or I could use virtual tours," that all of these things and technologies that are available suddenly come into play, and I think that really will have incredible outcomes for this type of industry.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about the Zillow piece? Because, well, I guess I'll ask the question this way. Why am I not seeing the land today when I go on there? Because I would have lost the bet. If you had bet me how much percentage of Zillow is land, I would have lost that bet. And obviously 17%, 22% in Utah. Why am I not seeing that? Why would I have lost that bet?
It actually is something really silly and simple. When most people go into Zillow, they're looking at a certain price range. They're looking at a certain type of thing. And so, one of two ways you can set a minimum, maximum price, or you can pick what type of thing you're looking for. And most people say, yeah, I don't want to look anything that's less than $200,000, and I don't want to look anything more than a million. And so, just by doing that, all of those pieces of land that cost $50,000, $60,000 are just no longer showing up in your filter. If you haven't clicked the land button on like, what are you looking for? It's not going to show up. So, I just think people aren't accustomed to thinking about land as an opportunity. And what I'm suggesting here changes that, because instead of land being sold for 50,000, it's home A, B, or C sold for 370, 420, 580. And suddenly, like, you're seeing a home that's in the price range that you're thinking about. It doesn't exist yet, but you can now see and visualize this opportunity. It shows up in your filter. And that's where I think it can get really amazing down the road.
I totally agree. Well said. I think the other thing I wanted to ask you was you mentioned innovation, and we're both passionate. I'm very passionate about manufactured modular housing as a construction type. Have you given thought to what the impact might be for factory built offsite construction, and how could that play into a proposal like this?
Yeah, I'm trying to think through that. I actually reached out to Leslie Gooch, who runs MHI, just to get her thoughts on the proposal. I think it's a slam dunk for that industry. And the reason I say that is, like, to be a reliable builder, you need to build fast and reliably. And who does that really well is offsite construction, manufactured housing. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity. Now, as I've been kind of exploring Zillow and kind of thinking about doing the math, like looking at places like Cleveland, like a tear down or a lot, like, is a perfect place to put like a brand new cross mod or manufactured housing advantage double wide that will look better than every home in that neighborhood, but like cost less. I mean, I just think there's a huge opportunity. In fact, I mean, if the product gets some traction, I would even say, if this is an objective for Fannie Mae and MHI thinks there's an opportunity, they should really lean in. You know, they should sort of say, we're going to give pre-approvals to manufactured housing development, or anybody who does factory built will get some sort of fast track, or we'll get a benefit on the pricing, whatever it might be. They could really influence that market in a positive way. That's not a must have, but I think it's a really incredible opportunity for that industry.
I totally agree. I mean, that falls in line with a lot of what you see out of the pricing and capital markets component of Fannie and Freddie. Fannie can say, we want more of this, and our investors want more of this, and they price the rate sheet and those different products accordingly. And so, if there's a demand, especially from investors, RMBS investors, if you're listening, if there's a demand for a certain type of loan, they will incentivize it. And I think this is one, to our earlier comment about the convergence of all of this. This is one of those moments where we could do that and really see some impact to a lot of cities, a lot of urban infill, which I know they've been trying to solve that riddle. This helps with that. I'll just tell a quick story, John, because I do think it's helpful. I looked at a modular manufactured housing design company called Connect Homes in Los Angeles County a couple years ago, but they actually ran their own test, and they bought a property in Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, within Los Angeles County. They tore down a home that had been built in the 40s, 50s. It cost $800,000 to acquire that lot with that house on it. They then tore it down, which was part of the overall cost, about 880,000 or something like that. They then put their new home on it and sent an appraiser in, not with any background of how that home got there. Well, it was just brand new build in Los Angeles. Please appraise this. It cost them $800,000 to manufacture and put it on the land. So you're all in for about 1.6, 1.7 million in Los Angeles, and it appraised for 2.3.
Yep.
So there is a story here. Now that's Los Angeles, where the home price is a lot higher, but imagine what that would cost to acquire and demolish in, like you said, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and then build on it. I do think that you are right. The demolition story is overstated of how efficient and inexpensive it can be if you have the demand for it and you have some regular participants and repeat players. So I think that just wanted to share that because it supports what you were saying about the different ways in which this potentially plays out.
Yeah, I love that story, and what it has me. I've been thinking about this a lot, which is there are opportunities to go do this. Why aren't people doing it? And as you know, I think one of the reasons is it's just awful to do. It's complicated. And by the way, if you're doing hard money lending as a fix and flip, that's really expensive financing. You got to qualify for it. You're kind of limiting the pool of people that can do it. So you don't have a lot of people out there looking at all these individual opportunities and really analyzing and assessing them for specific needs. That suddenly, if you do this product right, you open up the eyeballs that are out there analyzing this to millions of people who are either looking for their first home or their next home. And those eyeballs and the creativity of that sort of sudden influx of demand, I think will find those opportunities like you're talking about in Los Angeles. And honestly, I'm glad you used that example. That is a high price point. But this is not for just like manufactured housing on a small infill lot in Detroit. This is for anything and everything. It really has completely flexible uses. And as we've always said, all supply is good supply. I don't think that should be every solution should be focused on building $1 million homes like this one in California you mentioned. But look, man, you get people out there starting to build new homes, and this is what we need to see happen. We need to see American families unleashed on this problem on an individual level in individual communities with builders who are individual small community builders. They're the ones that can really solve this problem versus a sort of high level nationally trying to solve this problem with big builders.
That's right. So let's assume we've inspired, hopefully, a lot of our listeners around the Build My Home mortgage. Now, let's assume there are some folks listening who actually can help promote, influence, and make a difference. So if you've listened, we hope we've inspired you on Build My Home Mortgage. If you're in the group of people who can participate in advocating for this, John, do you have an ask for that audience? What can people do around this concept and around this proposal if they're listening and in a position to help or support Build My Home Mortgage?
Yeah, the ask I would make, the great thing about this proposal is that the authority to do this rests in one person, which is Director Bill Pulte at FHFA. Obviously, the implementation, the development will need to happen at Fannie, and they'll need to design. There will be work that needs to happen, but the authority rests in one person. He's got the pen on this. And so ultimately, what we need to do is we need to help the director understand what this proposal really is and how it will work and why it will be beneficial. And I would say that there's kind of three messages I want the industry to bring to the director. Number one is this is not like big construction project. This doesn't have construction risk concentrated in one spot. It's a highly diversified thing. So there isn't the construction risk that you usually think of when you talk about construction lending. The second is just the size of the opportunity. And that's why the 17, 6, 100, 17% of listings, 6 million vacant homes, 100 cities where it's upzoned. That is a really important stat to have in mind, which is like there's a massive opportunity to really start building at scale and really start building tomorrow at scale, which for an administration that's focused on the upcoming midterms has got to be really important. And I know Bill Pulte is really, really looking hard for solutions on how to make inroads in this problem, and this is a meaningful one. And then the last, I think, the thing that Fannie Mae is always paralyzed about, and FHFA, is they're going to go do something and they're going to get all sorts of backlash. And you saw this with the 50-year mortgage, which, I think a lot of people would say deservedly so. But anyway, you saw it with 50-year, you saw it with the Vantage tweet. And I think it just kind of puts the agency at this place like, do I want to stick my neck out and get my ass handed to me by a bunch of people who think I'm an idiot? And what I think would be really helpful is people say, look, we fully back you on this. We're not going to cry about this as like permanently expanding Fannie Mae's business because we're going to time bound this thing to 5 years and it's a good time to do it. We're not going to sort of say, oh, we should be focused on releasing them from conservatorship. That is a problem. The supply crisis is a bigger problem. We're going to solve that first. And then lastly, we're not going to say, oh, this is what the private market should be doing. The private market can't do this because of the crappy way it's designed. This is empowering lenders and builders at a level. So we've got your back, FHFA. Nobody's going to come after you. And if they do, we're going to shut them down right away because this is the right thing to do. And I think, again, just to sort of lay those things out, this is not about construction risk. The opportunity is massive, and we've got your back, director. I think if he hears those messages loud and clear from the industry, then he will have the comfort and ability to go execute on this. So all that's to say, like, it's the holidays. I'm trying to get as many people as I can to sort of be thinking about this problem and providing feedback. But starting in January is going to be a campaign to go get this message in front of the director and get him comfortable with this proposal, because he's seen versions of this, but he's seen versions of this that conflate it with AD&C lending. He knows building and he knows there was risk, and he's being very smart about being cautious about how much he wants to put the GSEs in this space. So he just needs to hear from the industry about why this is different, how it's different. And I think once he sees that and is helped through it by the industry, I think he's going to be super excited about this, because it's an exciting, amazing opportunity for them to do something that I think is going to, people will remember this for years, that this got done.
That's right. Everywhere we go, we hear supply, supply, supply. And now we have a story that says, look, we can come together around this. And I think the implications of getting everybody around the table, only good things will happen, because builders, financing, and real estate should all be working together anyway. And so if we can make this the flashpoint for that, let's do it. So in 2026, look for this. If you have reactions to this, thoughts on this, and you want to help refine it, reach out to us. We always give you podcast at housinginsiders.com, but also John and I are on LinkedIn. We're active. You can find us. And so whether it's through the podcast or reaching out to us, we want to be pushing this forward and accelerating it. So John, thanks for taking the part of guest today and proposing Build My Home Mortgage. I think this will be a really powerful episode in explaining the ins and outs of this and get more people around the table to ultimately get this the visibility it needs.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's actually great to be a guest, and some challenging questions there. Now I know how it feels for our guests who come on the show, but it's been fantastic. Thanks to everyone for listening and listening in. More to come on this topic, obviously, as we get into next year. But please remember to listen, subscribe, leave a review, and send us comments and questions on LinkedIn.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe so that we can put more of these episodes in your feed. Thank you for the music to Keenan Chen, and we'll see you all again a couple of Mondays from now.